April 1943. Deep in Nazi Germany's machinery of terror, a nurse named Elisabeth Marschall assumes her role at Ravensbrück, the largest women's concentration camp in the Reich. For many, she would be just another face in the SS. But for history, she would become one of the few female medical professionals held accountable for war crimes. Today, we tell the story of how a nurse betrayed the Reich, how the secret trial unfolded, and how justice, however limited, was sought. This is the secret trial of a Nazi collaborator. To understand Elisabeth Marschall, we must first understand the camp where she worked. Ravensbrück lies about 85 kilometers north of Berlin. Originally opened in 1939 for women prisoners, it became notorious for forced labor, medical experiments, and murder. Elisabeth was born 27 May 1886 in Meiningen, Germany. She trained as a nurse, passing her state exam in 1910. In April 1943, she began service as Oberschwester, head nurse at Ravensbrück. Her duties, among other things, selecting prisoners for transfer to extermination sites like Auschwitz, overseeing medical experiments, and assisting in procedures that violated all medical and human ethics. One inmate nurse testified, "I have seen Schwester Lisa beating sick women without any reason at all." Another reported how she loaded 50 women with newborn infants into a cart, left them without food or water overnight, and by morning, all 50 were dead. Here, in a place built for cruelty, a trained nurse became a cog in the machine. But the story doesn't end there. The term betrayal in our title refers to several layers of betrayal. First, betrayal of the Hippocratic ideal, a nurse's duty to preserve life. Second, betrayal of the Reich's own propaganda, the facade of care and medical science. Third, betrayal of humanity itself. Elisabeth Marschall embraced Nazi ideology, joining the party because Hitler could save Germany from its misery. She rose to a position of power within the camp's medical service, gaining influence over life and death decisions. At Ravensbrück, selections became routine. Those deemed unfit for work were sent to gas chambers, others were used in experiments. Marschall's involvement included the decision-making about who would live and who would die. Her signature, her authority, sealed the fate of many. This wasn't a moment of coercion only. Marschall actively participated. Witness testimony is clear her role was not peripheral. The betrayal is thus the transformation of a nurse into a perpetrator. As the war turned against Germany and the camp chaos grew, the system that had employed her collapsed, but the crimes remained. In April 1945, the Allies closed in. Prisoners were evacuated. Death marches began. Staff attempted to flee. Miss Marschall was arrested by British forces after the camp's liberation. The evidence against her was substantial. Documents, testimonies of surviving inmates, and the camp's records of selections and experiments. Her trial became one among many, the Hamburg Ravensbrück trials, which ran in late 1946 and early 1947. At roughly 61 years old, she was the oldest female Nazi war criminal executed by the British occupation authorities. The prosecution painted a picture of Marschall as both ideologue and functionary, someone who embraced the regime's goals and exploited her position to implement them. The defense tried to portray her as an administrator, just doing her job, but the court did not accept that. On 2 May 1947, Marschall was hanged by British executioner Albert Pierrepoint at Hamelin Prison. In that moment, the Reich's promise of ordered care, science, and humanity lay exposed as irrevocably broken. Why call it a secret trial? Because for decades, the role of female medical personnel in Nazi crimes remained under-examined. The public narrative focused on male SS officers. Nurses like Marschall were rarely in the spotlight. In the Hamburg trial, many hearings were closed or documented only in part. Survivors' voices reached the bench, but the story of how normal-looking professional women became perpetrators was hidden in plain sight.
The evidence included testimony of inmate nurses who worked alongside Marschall, documents showing the transfer lists of prisoners selected for extermination, her personnel file showing her Nazi Party membership, her promotion to head nurse, and her administrative authority. The prosecution's case emphasized the concept of medicalized murder, the misuse of nursing authority to facilitate selection and death. For instance, loading 50 mothers and infants in a cart and leaving them to die. The defense argued that she did not personally kill anyone, that she only administered as directed. The court rejected this mitigation, ruling that her involvement in selection constituted culpability. The verdict? Guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity, leading to the death sentence. Her execution underscored that professionalism and medical knowledge do not exempt one from moral responsibility. This trial broke ground. For the first time, a female nurse and high medical authority was publicly held to account. It opened a path for future prosecutions of medical personnel in mass atrocity contexts. What happened next? The broader legacy of the Marschall trial is still unfolding. First, it sent a message that even female nurses, who traditionally are celebrated as carers, could be perpetrators, that nursing credentials did not shield one from accountability. Second, it shaped medical ethics. In later decades, the legacy of Nazi medical crime spurred reforms in the nursing profession, emphasizing duty, consent, human rights, and vigilance against complicity. Third, it reminds us of the human face of evil. Marschall was not a caricature. She was a trained nurse, respected as a professional before becoming a functionary of death. And yet, the victims are at the heart of this story. Their suffering calls us to remember and to act. Today, historians still debate how many female medical staff participated in Nazi camps. A 2023 Polish historian described Marschall as part of a generational criminalization of medical staff at Stutthof and Ravensbrück. We must ask ourselves, how many more secrets lie beneath the archives? How many professional uniforms hid killers? In our modern world, where medicine and care are often trusted implicitly, the story of Elisabeth Marschall matters deeply. It warns us that authoritarian regimes can corrupt even healing professions. Professionals have both power and responsibility. Silence and obedience can become complicity. If a nurse, trained to save lives, can become an instrument of murder, then we must ask, what safeguards do we have around us? What choices must we make? For audiences in Ghana, Africa, or anywhere, the world must remember that atrocities are not always distant. They can happen where trust is high, where authority is given, where ethics are ignored. So when we read about the trial of this nurse, let it be more than history. Let it be a challenge to stand for care, to speak for the voiceless, to hold power to account. Elisabeth Marschall died on May 3, 1947. Her execution closed one chapter, but the trial opened many more. The world recognized for a moment that nursing is not just care, it is judgment, responsibility, humanity. If you found this story worth telling, please like, share, and subscribe. Dive into the archive. Keep memory alive. Until next time, we remember so that we never repeat. Thank you for watching.